Do you remember the best times you've had in prayer and worship? Do you remember how you got there? And do you remember how you felt? When I first began worshiping, I would accidentally have a deep time. Or in prayer, sometimes I would have this amazing time. It was very emotional. Sometimes I was listening to music going down the road, and out of nowhere, I would begin to weep. Over time, I discovered that I could actually control that. That I discovered that the elements that were in place that made that possible then, I could actually arrange that in such a way that I could experience God now. I have since, because of trouble and work and blah, 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 wandered away from that. And I'm coming back to this for us, this concept of we're living in the presence of God and we're doing all that we're doing for this audience of one, just for Jesus. Well, one of those essential elements is this experiencing God in your prayer and worship. Prayer and worship should be reflective. It should be hopeful. It should incite you to trust Him in very difficult situations and hope for things that are, in the physical world, a little unreasonable. But in order to do this, you have to have a real deep sense of His presence and that He's eager to accomplish those great things that you're calling Him to do. Otherwise, it can be rather painful to ask in prayer or be vulnerable in worship thinking He probably doesn't have any intention of moving on your behalf. Not only on personal issues, but as you concern yourself with kingdom issues. So we're revisiting this concept of whatever we're doing it before the face of God 24/7, and we're doing it for this one singular individual. Not in contrast to accomplishment, in contrast to accolades, in contrast to seeing massive results. Hey, the reason a lot of times I like doing projects because you know what? You have a beginning and you have an end and you saw something produced from it. You know, there's a reward in that all by itself, whether you got paid or not. And similar in Christianity. I mean, you know, you want to see your labor amount to something. Absolutely. But that can't be our major focal point. It has to be back to the more basic thing that God is present and I'm doing it for Him, and that's all. With these two concepts, we can regain a lot of the power that we've lost. A lot of the emotional experiences we reflect back on and we say, you know, I remember that time when worship was such and church was such, and maybe in one case I was and others were inducing this into you, and that's great, but you're trying to own it to where you can grab it on your own and maybe induce others into great faith and great service. So, what I would like us to do is this is going to have to be a real process, like I'm talking about 4 to 6 to 8 weeks of really working on this, where we're spending that time with God, we're preparing ourselves before worship, we're forcing ourselves to have hope where there is no hope, we're changing how we approach prayer. And so I want to give some exercises that will help you do that. So, what I would like us to do, we'll do this together, is start in the morning, before work, before the day starts, to sit in His presence and focus on this one thing, that God is here with me now. And let yourself be washed by this. That's your first step. And we'll do this daily. You'll do this before worship, when you get into worship, before you head to prayer. We're going to start with helping yourself become aware, reminding yourself that He's actually present. Try to sit there long enough that it goes from the intellectual, where, yeah, I know God is here, to like, yeah, I get it. God is truly here. Then what I want you to do, so this is in the morning, in the afternoon, this is before prayer, before worship, maybe on Sunday, or if you're doing something midweek, you're going to do that as your first step. Next, as we're dealing, we're trying to adjust our attitude and affect a change in our worship and prayer and let that roll over into our lives, right? This is the beginning, the presence of God, doing it for only Jesus, being very hopeful and letting and faith-filled to let that really catapult us to the lifestyle that we would like. That lifestyle being meaning kingdom people doing kingdom work, responding to our situations and our friends and our family and our community in a kingdom way. This is what we're wanting. It starts here. Daily preparing yourself in the presence of God. I want you to do that. Every time before you go to worship, don't start singing the songs. Set yourself in the presence of God. The next thing in this process that I would like you to do is before prayer, dream. How often, and I've mentioned this before, has prayer unfortunately been painful? That's a sign we're doing it wrong. An asset to prayer, to faith-filled prayer, we have to have hope. Now, in your experience, and you might have a sense of what I really should be hopeful for, and what I shouldn't. Maybe you've gotten a little tired or cold or cynical, and I get it. But after establishing the presence of God, we need to establish a foothold of hope. And this hope we have to start with seeing. We have to go there, to that place, and paint the picture in 3 dimensions and color and sound in our mind. I remember I was talking about something to Tanya, and I said, yeah, and this and that, and we'd do this, and we'd go there, and it'd be like this, and we started getting on the internet and looking at this stuff, and we got excited, and we hadn't even gone. Matter of fact, we never did it. But we had a great time in the process. Similarly, in prayer, you've got to paint the picture. You're going to the internet, so to speak. You're painting it with in full color and the sounds and 3 dimensions, and you're moving in this new reality of what you're hoping for. Then pray it. Use that as a launching place for your prayer. First, the presence of God, and then painting the picture properly. Quit doubting it. Quit saying, is this realistic? Because that's undermining. Just go there. Just go experience that future place. So if it's about relationships, what your relationship will look like in the future. What you want it to look like. If it's in your community, how you're going to be interacting with it for the kingdom. Go there first. Develop the excitement and hope and faith before you pray it. Discipline yourself. Require yourself that, say, for 6 weeks before I can pray it, I must see it and enjoy it and feel the hope of it before I can actually pray it. I just go visualize. It's like a movie. You see movies all the time and you're not there, but you're enjoying it. You hear stories and all sorts of things. You're enjoying, but you're not there. You're not experiencing it. You need to allow yourself to gain this kind of hope by seeing it in advance. So, Our homework is, in the morning, dwell in the presence of God. Get it from your head to your heart where you really sense it. Before worship, before prayer, that's your first step. Second step in prayer, now we're talking prayer only. In prayer, see it, enjoy it, experience it, to engage your hope and your faith, and then pray for that.